Hi, welcome to Yukiro Music. I've taken the more casual chair today because this is a more casual video. I don't have a script today. I'm just going to go through the rooms at this audio show and talk about them. So this audio show is called Take 5. It's a one-day event. It's pretty small because it's held by a single retailer, or not really a retailer. It's held by Perfect Sense that I bought the MU2 from. And Perfect Sense has a showroom that's available by appointment, so it's not really retail in that sense. Instead, they rely on home loan, so people evaluate equipment in the context of their own system, but then also on this annual show where they exhibit a bunch of different systems in a way that they can't really do in the showroom. And I quite like that it's just 10 systems, because you can just show up and give each system a fair chance and not be too stressed out. On a bigger sort of regular audio show, you have to almost plan ahead, like what you're going to go to, what you're going to skip, and sort of what your priorities are. You can be a lot more relaxed about it here, which I think is just better in general. I didn't get to go to the headphones section because it was full the whole time. I had actually wanted to audition some headphones in there, but I could do that some other time. I mean, I'm in the same city as Perfect Sense, so no rush. So now I'm gonna start going through the systems. I brought my camera, the very camera I'm filming this on right now, but no memory card like an idiot. So my sort of YouTube filmmaking career is not off to a great start. So you're gonna have to make do with like phone photos. So I'll have a photo of each system and then I'll talk about what I thought and what's in it and so on. In the info box below the video here, you'll have timestamps for each of the rooms if you wanna hear more about a specific one. So the first system, speakers are the TAD ME1-TX, which is their latest stand mount. I have a lot of faith in TAD. I've heard their bigger speakers sound utterly mind-blowingly amazing at shows. This was not one of those. This was actually a bit of a letdown for me. I'm not going to blame the speakers, by the way. And in general, at shows, you can't really tell much about a system other than, you know, if it sounds good, you know it has the capacity to sound good. If it sounds bad, it might still have the capacity to sound good. It might be the room, it might be interaction between components, it might be how it's set up. So I'm not judging any particular system here. I'm just giving you my subjective impressions about this particular show and these particular setups. So I did not get the sound I kind of expected out of these speakers. They also had this gigantic Ariel, do you say Ariel or Rel? Anyway, this gigantic sub that they took in and out of the system. Now, there's some interesting stuff in the rack here that if you're not from Sweden, you might have never come across. Cabling, the power distributor, the amplifier, integrated amplifier that's on the bottom shelf, and the DAC that's on the middle shelf is all from a Swedish company called Regal. He started out making cables because he has some clever techniques that he uses that seems fairly novel in the world of cables. I've not evaluated them, so I can't speak to that, but I know he's getting good feedback. And like Anders, who is the main man here at that company, he is just full-on electrical engineer. Like, he is very true to the science of this stuff. The amplifier is an AB, Class AB design, with some novel solutions inside of it. I can't recite all the details because I'm afraid I'm going to get something wrong, and that would not be good. It is an expensive unit. This is like 25,000 euros or slightly above, depending on your sort of sales tax in your region. The DAC is much cheaper though. That's like 5,000 euros. And it also has some pretty novel solutions inside of it. The guy, the designer of these things, he was running the system. I kind of want to interview him for this channel because he's going to give this very unfiltered, pure engineering perspective. He's not going to give you a bunch of audiophile mumbo jumbo, which is really refreshing. I really appreciate that. And he's really knowledgeable. So if you want to see me try to get an interview with him for this channel, and we'll do some proper digital processing, deep dive, nerd out about this, let me know in that case. So anyway, not my favorite system at the show, but I'm eager to hear these speakers and the recently updated floor standards, a level above these, that weren't at the show and that are coming out in a month or two, here in Europe at least. Next system was the really, really big boys, the biggest room at the show, and possibly the most expensive system. I'll put some prices on screen in euros if I can find them. I usually feel that the most expensive systems at shows are kind of underwhelming because that kind of money, you just got to blow everything out of the water to justify it. But at this show, this might have been the best sound in show. So I'll have to concede that you do get not a lot for your money maybe, but it isn't just more money. There's something in return for that more money. So the speakers here are Kroma, Atelier, Callus. So that's a top tier series from Kroma, which is a brand I hadn't heard much about before, but it's the smallest speaker in the top tier, and they are big speakers. They're bigger than these. The monoblocks and the preamp with its separate power supply on the bottom shelf are all from Orpheus. No idea what they sound like other than in this system, and this system sounded awesome. On the top shelf, we have the WADAX Studio player, which is a very, very fancy and very, very expensive digital source. Although it is the cheaper option from WADAX. So how did this sound? Well, very big, very coherent. These sort of ribbon tweeters aren't always easy to integrate, but I couldn't really fault them here. It sounded, again, like really coherent, very majestic and effortless and very satisfying. I came back to this room several times. So this next system was actually sort of 2-in-1 because they alternated the speakers, played like half an hour to an hour on each and then switched. And that was a very interesting comparison. When I came in, they were playing on these Harbeth speakers. So I think these are the P3ESR XD2. Jesus Christ, Harbeth marketing, can you get a grip? Like, what is that name? Oh man. Anyway, they are so tiny. They are just incredibly small speakers, but they sounded bigger than I think I could possibly have expected. Of course they don't sound like big floor standards, not at all. But like, this is a small room, it's a small intimate space, and most people have that kind of space at home. So it was a really good way to show the sort of quality and intimacy that you can get from the sound using a setup like this. So I appreciate them demoing these sort of more modest systems. It's a lot of money still in this system, but with these speakers and just a decent turntable and a decent integrated amp, you get very far. You get very pleasing sound. But then they changed the speakers to Diapason, Paris 3, and this is the olive wood version, which is slightly more expensive than the walnut version. And these are something like 2,000 euro more expensive than the Harbeth, and they sounded it. They just sounded better. Extra saturation to the sound with these over the Harbeth. And again, the Harbeth sounded excellent as well. So next up is this PMC system. Amplification is B.Audio PMG Signature preamp, and it's also the PMG Signature 512 DAC on the top shelf. That PMG Signature line doesn't have amplifiers yet, I think. So the amplifiers are the M1200, also B.Audio. And then there's the Revox reel-to-reel player. They didn't play that though because they hadn't rewound the tapes correctly or something, which kind of just goes to show that, you know, people ridicule vinyl for being impractical, but man, tape is just another level. There's also the acoustic treatment here. The sort of diffuser panels that are behind the speakers here, they were moved out mid-song to the side so you could compare how they sounded. So it's a Swedish designer. He's mostly dealt with Pro Audio until now, so a bunch of Pro Audio studios have these. So it is diffusion going forward, so the scattering of sound, but the little holes here lead into, when they're wall mounted, a cavity behind the panel. Like here they're freestanding, but if you mount them to a wall, you'll have a cavity behind that you tune, so like a Helmholtz absorber that you will tune to remedy certain room notes in your room. I heard a difference when they wheeled them out to the side. It wasn't super obvious from this side position which was better, but they kind of look cool. And they were in the other room too, right? Did you see that? They had a couple of freestanding ones in the Harbeth and Diapason room. Okay, sound. Do I have anything to say? This sounded pretty good. These speakers, they're very narrow, and I closed my eyes for most of the listening because I just kept thinking about how narrow the baffle is and how I imagined I could hear that the baffle is narrow, and I hated myself for thinking that. And so I closed my eyes trying to, take that bias away and just listen. And that was probably all in my head, that I could hear the width of the baffle, but very coherent. These are very competent speakers, and you get a lot for your money with these. Now for another new speaker brand, or at least new to me, probably new to you, Aretai. These are the smallest in at least this series. I don't know how much they have. Now these stands are very low. The tweeter would be below ear height, even in this sort of low chair that I'm sitting in now. I couldn't really hear that that was a problem standing up, sitting down. I like moving my head around. I didn't catch that that was a problem. They're probably tuned and designed for that. The sort of waveguide shape surrounding the tweeter is in a wood option here. As you can see on the backdrop, the default is kind of white. They look nice. I am not fully certain what was room and what was speaker, but there was a sort of high bass resonance in here that was not good. I certainly hope that that was not the cabinet, because it was very obviously problematic. There's a bass on the back of the speaker as well, so they output a lot of bass considering their size. Not to the extent that some active speakers can do, but fairly impressive. And for a small, pleasing to the eye kind of speaker, they projected a big sound, and they played a lot of sort of almost special effecty type music to really sort of drive home that point, and they did it very loud to also show that they could go loud. So in adjacent rooms, you kept hearing the same sort of techno track come back again and again, which was slightly annoying. Nice, compact, minimalist system, but yeah, not one that sort of won my heart. But you can see from the photo too, it's just naked concrete. It's a tough room, man. It's hard to avoid hard reflections when the room looks like this. I mean, it looks cool, but doesn't... Well, it also sounds cool, I guess. Cool in the negative sense. Cold. Anyway, let's move on to the next room. And this was probably my favorite. Yeah, the big room with the Kroma speakers, that probably sounded better overall if I just had to pick a sound, but in terms of bang for your buck, this one's the winner. And unsurprisingly, it has a Grimm Audio MU2 in it. So who would have thought that I would enjoy the room with the MU2? When going into the room, I was thinking, okay, this is just speakers that are unknown to me and a room that hasn't sounded great before. I was at this show last year too, and the speakers that were in this room that year, I think some Stenheim, one of the smaller Stenheims, just sounded like the sound was just glued to each speaker. There was no sound stage. I could just hear everything from that speaker and that speaker just projected at me, which was probably a room thing. But that was not the case at all this time, and there was no sort of room treatment to talk of. But these speakers have very sort of controlled dispersion, despite being a passive speaker. They were able to do that really well. So this had extremely pleasing sound. Maybe not, the final word in resolution and spectral width or whatever, but I just wanted to sit there. Now, judging a DAC at an audio show is stupid. Like, you can't, really. So I wasn't expecting to really be able to sonically identify the MU2 in here, other than, knowing that it's a very, very competent piece of equipment and would probably let the speakers and the amplifiers, show their best sides. But sitting there, I got some of those sensations I get with the MU2 here in my system, that there's just this pleasing thing. Like after a while, 5 or 10 minutes, just something just happens inside of me that makes me go, wow. I just get over some threshold and I just go, man, that is something extra. And it happened in this room too. Is that the MU2? Is that my imagination? I'm sure some of you are very eager to tell me that that's all my imagination. But I came back to this room, I think 3 or 4 times, and it was just so great every time. The very tiny amplifiers, or AGD, which are GaN-FET monoblocks. The sound of this room makes me want to check out these AGD amps because they're so tiny, and yes, it would change one box into 2, but it would be less sort of volume in general, and you could just hide these behind the speakers and have an even more sort of clean and uncluttered system. Hilariously, the smallest amplifiers at the show have been paired with the biggest cables at the show. These are vacuum hose dimension cables from Inakustik, German brand. That also, it's the bottom shelf in the rack is their one of their power conditioner things. Just preposterously thick cables because of how they sort of suspend the strands inside of some construction. I'll say 2 more things about this room. As you can see in this shot when I've zoomed in, the top of the MU2 it looks almost like sort of a coarse 3D print. You know, you can tell by looking at something that is 3D printed by the sort of surface structure. And it's with circles so that it sort of resembles a vinyl record when you look at it. But those grooves, they collect dust. Like, it gets so clogged up with dust in the grooves, and it's kind of hard to get it out. If you wipe it down, you don't get it out very easily. This is a genuine drawback with the MU2. It's difficult to keep clean. And look at this demo unit. It's gotten so much dirtier after it was here, so someone else has had it home and not really cleaned it. And the second thing I want to say about this room is sort of an anecdote about how I got into high-end audio. So in 2009, I went to the big audio show here in Stockholm. There's one in February each year, and I usually go out of curiosity. And in 2009, I went like every year. And then the last room I went into, or the last room I remember going into, was super crowded, and I had to like squeeze into a back corner of the room, which is acoustically awful. But the sound in there just floored me, like, or it would have floored me if there was room to lie down, but it was so packed. But it was just incredible. And it just got so stuck in my head, the sound in that room, that I ended up, after 6 months of just torment, just buying those speakers on a down payment plan. It was at the time the most expensive thing I'd ever bought. Those were the Focal Diablo Utopia. I since upgraded to these. This is the bigger sibling, the Scala Utopia. And one track that was played in that room when I sort of got hooked on those speakers, which was my entry point into high-end audio, was These Bones by the Fairfield 4, which is a sort of a gimmicky track. It's like a barbershop quartet that has existed for like 80 years. It's not the same members for 80 years. As a group, they're sort of a ship of Theseus that they've just been exchanged so that there's nothing original left. This track, the bass singer, he gets to really exercise his range. It's some insane bass vocals in there, and which makes for, you know, a fun sort of audio show track. And that was played when I fell in love with the speakers, not because of the track, but I remembered the track because of the speakers. And walking into this room for like the 3rd or 4th time on this show yesterday, what do you know? It's These Bones by the Fairfield 4 through the Grimm Audio MU2. So this song is very expensive for me. Now, I had already bought the MU2 at this point, but so far it shows up on things I buy. Then System 7, this was up in an actual hotel room. So this was held at a hotel, but most of the rooms are sort of conference room or showrooms. 2 rooms were in actual hotel rooms, and this is the first of the 2. So very minimal system again, which I appreciate. I think it's cool to show that you don't need, you know, 100 different boxes and weird doohickeys to build a competent hi-fi system. So this was not a favorite room at the show. It was set up super wide, and one speaker, the left one here, is close to a wall, the right one isn't. So I had center seat, but it just did not sound engaging. It was just flat and sort of dead sounding in a way that was a little bit bewildering. I don't know what to blame. I have not heard the speakers or the amp or the streamer in any other context. I have not heard any other systems in this room, so I have no idea what was going on here. I have good reason to believe these are all competent products. It's just, yeah, it didn't touch me in this particular combination in this particular setup. So I'll just move on to the next room. So this is another system that was in an actual hotel room. You can see that the aesthetic of this hotel is a lot of like bare concrete. This is the very Playback Designs MPD6 that I had on home loan. Playing here with speakers from, I think, a Belgian company called Ilumnia. These are the Vocalis Mark II NE. And they're very adjustable speakers. They have some adjustment options on the back. So you can do neutral, thin, and warm in the sound, and then you have mid and high on little dials. So very adjustable, and I think you can move the bass reflex port in and out as well to tune that. It sounded a little bit brittle up top in a way I would probably have wanted to adjust. But again, I think I was mostly seated off to the side in here, so I shouldn't be too harsh on them. They're really peculiar designs with a sort of upwards firing membrane and then the tweeter sort of suspended above. And they are powered speakers, but not for amplification, but there's like a voltage running into the speaker element somehow. You should probably look at their website to figure out what was going on here, because I'm not gonna be able to explain what this is. Some novel concepts at play for sure, and a bit of a hyped speaker in certain audiophile circuits didn't really poke me in the right spot in this particular room. The amplifier up top is the world premiere of the Enleum Amp 54R. It was difficult to get a good photo here because of the light, but it's a pretty slick looking futuristic piece of equipment, but the price was a little bit higher than I kind of anticipated. I'll see if I can find the exact figure, but this was the world premiere, so it might not be easy to find a number yet. Next one up is this Basel Acoustics V01 speaker. Another one with the tweeter sort of suspended on the top, kind of like Bowers and Wilkins have done on some designs and that you saw on the previous speaker. These are, I think, designed by Sven Bönnecke. Is that how you pronounce his name? But for this other company called Basel Acoustics. This is one of only 2 turntables, I think, at the show. I don't know what the cartridge was. I didn't recognize it. Maybe that's on me. I mean, it looks cool, and I've probably figured it out by now, so I'll put it on screen. So a very analog system here. This either had some really problematic room modes, or there's something about this cabinet that is not to my liking, because on this Beck album that was playing when I took the photo, for example, there was a snare drum, and I don't know which track it was, but there's a snare drum that sounded very cardboardy in a way that stood out. And I don't know if that cardboardy snare was, speaker cabinets or room or the cartridge or the recording or, whatever. So not a room I spent a lot of time in. I could kind of tell that it wasn't sort of my type of sound. So I don't feel the need to stick around and sort of determine precisely why I don't like it. It was just, yeah, rather just sit down in a room that was more immediately to my liking. The turntable, I will say, is very nice looking. I think it's a good balance between classic, very strict utilitarian industrial design, yet a luxurious sort of audiophile product. Not everyone strikes that balance in a way that appeals to me, but I thought this looked really nice. And then in the last room, I seem to have somehow not taken a photo. I have no idea how that happened. So these are the Stenheim Illumine 5SE, Illumine, I don't know how to pronounce the series. These are really big Stenheim speakers, but they have bigger ones. And then Karan Acoustics. So Karan Acoustics was founded by Milan Karan, who unfortunately died at only age 59, like a year and a half ago or something. So I thought that that was it. The brand is done for, but they have regrouped, and I think his son is now running it together with some of the people that worked for the company. So they're back in business, or were never really out of business and producing. And so glad to see that a brand can survive something like that. Somehow, I have still not heard Stenheim speakers sound really convincing to me. I know so many people have had great experiences with them at shows, and I just must have really bad luck or something because I just haven't been convinced yet. I'm sure they're super competent products, so this might be more of a me thing than anything else. But yeah, again, I wasn't charmed by this. And it was also the room at the show that played the quietest. It was really low volume, so low that it was probably detrimental to the listening experience. At one point, actually, when I first came into the room, I went in twice. When I first came in, they had very audible distortion in the sound, sounding like you're playing back something at the wrong sample rate. So there's some mega crunchy digital type of distortion going on. And it went on for like a minute before the guy operating the room even noticed or changed the track, which was, alarming. But I don't know, that might have been some issue that I wasn't aware of, or he was searching for some other track or something. But like, I would just hit pause immediately if some system sounded like that. It was very obviously wrong. When it was right, it didn't sound bad. It just wasn't captivating. It was really quiet, and the music was also probably my least favorite at the show, which might have influenced all of this. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here is that at these shows, there's usually also some lectures. Last year I skipped them because I was short on time, but this year I went to one of them, and that was a representative from WADAX wanting to talk about digital audio and sort of the philosophy around it. And WADAX being the manufacturers of perhaps one of the most expensive DACs on the planet, the Atlantis or whatever it's called. I thought, okay, these guys play in the big leagues. Let's hear what they have to say. And the guy talking was an American. WADAX is a Spanish company, but this was an American that had flown in for this. And he was not a technical person. He was sort of a PR marketing system setup type person. So there wasn't a lot of technical discussion to be had, which I was a little bit disappointed by. But he made some claims that are technical in their nature. And he also said, by the way, that this was the first time he was doing this sort of open discussion type thing at a show. And he explicitly requested feedback from us in the audience. And I gave him a lot of it. I probably spoke the most in that room. So what I'm about to tell you now is also stuff that I conveyed to him. And he's not here to defend himself. So I don't want to throw him under the bus too much in this video. I don't think that's fair. But he made statements that I think lack any sort of scientific backing. To me, it just sounded like complete make-believe voodoo nonsense. It sounded like superstition, basically. And so I pushed back on some of it and didn't really feel like that landed correctly. So to me, someone who at least knows a thing or two about digital signal processing and digital to analog conversion, it actually undermined my confidence in what they're doing. Now, he isn't the designer. He's not building these products. So maybe I shouldn't interpret it that way. But I think if you're out representing the company, you need to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed and your ducks in a row and all the other sayings. If you're going to talk about what goes into making their products so special, you should know what makes them so special. You should have your talking points a little bit more ready. So I hope he does his homework. We'll see. I hope he is able to sit down with Javier, the designer at WADAX, and really sort of ingest the engineering perspective and be able to recite some of that instead of what he was doing now. Anyway, so that's a long and rambling video. I'm going to try to cut this down as tightly as I can in the edit. Hopefully it's not a half hour long. Later this week, I'm going to get into actual reviews on this channel. So hit subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss that. I'm going to be starting a series on active loudspeakers. So until then, see ya.